Okay, so just checking. Can everybody see my screen? Is it showing up?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So yes. So today the section is one of the series of what we do in TEDx and Compass Hong Kong. It's a climate change countdown event that we did last October, where we have speakers who talk about microplastic, talk about coral reef, talking about carbon emission. So today is actually one of the sorry, I might just need to mute some of you, just make sure we don't have background noise. Um, yeah, so today is just one of the series of event that we do for that. We also have done different climate change topic. We have done climate change in pandemic, climate change and biodiversity, climate change and wine, which Sybil here also give us. So we try to use very fun ways to talk about climate change. And I hope it seems some of you here are very serious coffee lover. So hopefully after today's talk, you will also learn something new about coffee. So a little bit about myself. I founded this company called Encompass 2.5 years ago. We do everything about sustainable development goals. I'm also a very passionate scuba diver. Scuba diving is a very big part of me, but I am also a very serious coffee drinker. I think I've started drinking coffee since I'm 7, and I get very edgy if I don't drink coffee throughout the day. I don't think I need the caffeine for staying up anymore, but it just really makes my day and makes me going. I don't know what coffee means to you, but coffee is a very important topic for me. And for Encompass, I have done sustainable coffee tasting a several times to talk about responsible consumption. So a little bit about Encompass for those of you who are new to us. We established in 2018, structured as a social enterprise. So we work a lot with different NGOs. We do different workshops, tour, experiential learning programs. So we do a lot of corporate training program. We also work with university and schools. So if you have some good project you think of us, please feel free to wish us through email, Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever that is. So everything we do here is related to the SDGs. And in case you don't know what the SDGs are, they are the 17 Sustainable Development Goal developed by the United Nations to be achieved by 2030. So they are very ambitious goal. And today we're going to look at climate change, climate action. So climate action, this is my favorite diagram, the SDG cake. Climate action is in here in the planet along with life below water and life on land. So obviously coffee is a plant as well. So coffee is affecting life on land. But because of the climate change on coffee, it also affects production, it affects livelihood. So it's also related to decent work and economic growth. Also related to like maybe gender equality as well, because a lot of farmers who work are also women. So this is just a holistic way of looking at the SDGs. So just a little bit of a intro. We do many different programs. As I said, we do a lot of sustainable tasting. We have done topics on coffee, wine, beer. We also do D&I education. We have done many climate change talk for corporates and school as well. So again, if you think of an organization which might benefit, they may or may not need to be in Hong Kong. We can do it virtually. We were happy to arrange that. So climate, this is a diagram that the climate is increasing. So I mean the global warming is increasing, the temperature is increasing. As you can see, from 2019, we got more and more red. The temperature is getting more and more hot. And I think just for those of us in Hong Kong, you will definitely feel that in the last week. It's just April, but like the temperature has gone up so crazily already. And as we can see, like extreme weather across the globe, whether it's the snowstorm in Texas or different heat wave, it is definitely affecting a lot of us. And I don't know how many of you have seen this diagram. This diagram is called the Great Acceleration. So since the industrial revolution, since like the human is increasing, we are increasing everything from water usage, paper production, GDP, world population, all increasing. And with that, all the environmental metrics, including carbon dioxide, which causes greenhouse gas, causes the global warming, but everything else is increasing. So it's not only global warming, human is creating a new age because the sheer number of us. And this concept is called Anthropocene. I don't know how many of you have heard of that. It's not an official geological age, like some of you who have studied geology before have heard of the Jurassic Age, the Cenozoic Age, the Pleistocene Age. But human, since 1950, because of all our pollution, of all our everything, we are creating a man-made geological era. And this is a diagram that with climate change, if we are not doing extreme emission cut, we are going to well above 4 degrees Celsius if the environment is not changing. And the Paris Agreement is saying that we hope to limit the emission within 1.5. But this means a lot of very strong actions need to be taken. Today, the focus is not on the science on climate change, but more on coffee. But I think this is a useful overview. And if you look at the impact of climate change in general, not only on coffee, it affects productivity of our harvest. It will cause extreme weather, and like Sybil here, who does the climate change on Wine Talk, will know, like for example, climate change has affected Australia a lot in 2016 and 19, and it affected the grapes and the vine. But it also climate change also increase like drought and different area, and so that we also have this concept on called climate refugees. So like climate is really this really complicated thing, but today we're going to use coffee to understand climate change on the impact. So maybe let's start with a little fun game. Sorry, let me do a second poll. Let's see what the group think. When do you think coffee history starts? So a lot of you say you are very serious coffee drinker. So let's see what you think as a group. Very different answer. Okay, another 10 seconds for those who haven't voted. So guess, I think you guys all heard about the coffee bean, and maybe like the coffee bean was discovered in Ethiopia, and then the whole coffee industry started. 5 more seconds for the 3 of you who have an answer. Okay, and the answer is, oops. The answer is actually 11th century. The coffee plant was discovered in Ethiopia when it was disguised as a white blossom. And then people find that the caffeine has this property to make people like hyper or energetic. And then in the rest, and you guys, I think you know the rest of the history, where different parts of the world, England, Istanbul, Netherlands, they all have their own coffee industry or introduce coffee in the thing. So the official answer is the official coffee process started in the 11th century. So that's quite a fun fact. And coffee is the second most traded commodity in the world. The first is crude oil. And you can see there are many coffee producing countries here. Usually these coffee industries, coffee producing countries are not very strong economy. They tend to be developing countries and tend to live near the equator. Some other fun facts of coffee. Coffee, you might heard Arabica coffee. That's the most common type of coffee, but there's also a different type of beans called Robusta. Coffee affect a lot of people livelihood, affect 125 million people livelihood, and there are many consumption. And for those of us in Hong Kong, you would know like cafe is like popping up everywhere in Hong Kong, from Soho to Sham Shui Po. It's really like a very important part of our culture now. And if we want to look at the coffee plant, as I said, they make 2 main types of coffee beans. They are Arabica and Robusta. Their ideal temperature is slightly different, and the environment is slightly different. So Arabica plants tend to like shaded environment, where Robusta is more sun. Coffee beans, they need a certain condition to go, so climate change will affect them, and we'll look at them closely in a moment. So yes, here is another diagram. The consumption this is back in 2016 has doubled in the last 35 years. But I think this number is going to keep increasing. We have now a very strong coffee culture. And however, on the diagram on the right, you will see that a production suitable for coffee production is going to be decreasing because of the climate change. There are less and less ideal area for coffee. And what other than production, it also affected the coffee quality, which we will look at it closely. So Arabica, this is our main point of discussion today. As I said, they are a type of coffee bean that which is the most common one. They are certain conditions other than the temperature. They also need dry period for them to flower well. So not all wet time, but however, with climate change, it's really affecting their flowering cycle with the extreme weather and maybe sudden flood. They also need some sort of soaking to initiate flowering. But not continuous rain. So just enough for the flower to germinate. And then they also need not too high a temperature because it stresses them out. So that's why with global warming, with the increasing temperature, it really affected the Arabica bean. They also need regular rainfall throughout the berry development stage, not continuous, but regular enough for them to develop. And they also need a drier period coming up to harvest. So as you can see, there are many different types of environmental factors that affect the Arabica growing. So these are some other climate change impact on the coffee. Other than the coffee plant, as I said, it affects their flowering, it affects the drying. It also affects the pathogen that infesting the plant, and we'll give you an example in a moment. It also affects the coffee producer, how they're going to interact with the plant. So again, there will be more examples of that later today. So coffee, this is a little bit more science. I won't go into the physiology, but there are some really good articles on how the light stress, heat stress, and drought stress affect the coffee plant. It's a little bit more biology chemical, but basically the drought, heat, and light will create different stress on the coffee. And it is projected that because of the climate change, we will reduce the global area suitable for coffee production as much as by 50%. So that will have effect on our coffee quality, coffee pricing, and all that. So climate change is affecting all of us. And for those of us who are serious coffee lover, I'm not sure how much your coffee will cost in 20 years, when 20 or 20 or 30 years when coffee is when climate change is really affecting us. So let's look at this closely. So I was saying that coffee is mostly grown in less developed countries, and there's this concept called the bean belt. The bean belt is the area where coffee is most suitable for growing. So the rising temperature mean coffee plant might become heat stressed, and the lifespan of pests who eat the beans become longer. So for example, in Tanzania, the gradually rising temperature have already reduced coffee yields by 50% since the 1920s. Another example, in 2014, in Brazil, the largest producer of Arabica beans was hit by a catastrophic drought that threatened much of the country's yield. And if you want to look at more case study, I won't go into this in detail, but basically this is an example of how climate change has affected some of the countries in these belt countries who are producing this. As you can see, for example, in Tanzania and Vietnam, the different climate change have caused different types of yield and different problem. So here's a little bit more technical diagram. So how does coffee farming going to change with the changing climate? So let's look at the diagram on the left on the left here. So coffee farming usually is in a more lowland area, and however with the temperature change, so it's getting more heat, so the plants go higher up so they can escape from the heat. However, the drought and the heavy downpour also affecting them. And also there will the coffee pests and the coffee berry borer beetle, like the pathogen, is also moving upslope. So not only the coffee plant, but the pathogens that are affecting them are also moving up. And there's risk of deforestation as coffee migrates upslope and also affecting biodiversity. So how can you help here? So for example, what can consumers help? For example, some coffee company have now, with the pressure of consumer and reading the risk, they have assist more smallholders or small farmers to help. Choose brands that guarantee a fair return to smallholder farmers and their communities, help them to build their capacity to adapt to climate change. So, for example, some fair trade programs can do that. The third thing is to demand action from companies and government. This is slightly more difficult, but I'll give you some more actionable things later for you to do. Sorry. So yes, so this is just another diagram. As I said, coffee production is expected to, the suitable area for coffee production is going to be less by 50%. And this is just a diagram of what that looks like. So here's another more diagram on what are some other effects on the climate change. As you can see, like with certain degree, that you will be affecting the fruit ripening, photosynthetic wake, also increasing the indirect impact, also increasing pest and disease. The rain itself also affected the tree, and it causes soil erosion. The soil quality is not as good. The intermittent and unseasonal rain, as we can see, the Arabica bean needs certain types of rainfall, not just like sometimes you need regular, sometimes you need occasional, you can't be continuous, so it also affects flower frequency. Same thing with rain, it might reduce flowering, and if it's drought for too long, it also stresses the tree. Again, this is very technical, but just to have a view that it affects the plants in many different ways. So first of all, I think as coffee drinker, we are very concerned about coffee quality. So as temperature rise, it actually affected coffee quality. And why is that? Because at lower temperature, the coffee beans are able to ripen more slowly, which cause complex acids and sugar to develop, so the taste is better. So coffee, just like wine, gets some of the complexity of the flavor from the slower maturation. So if the temperature is too high, it's ripening too quickly, it's actually affecting the quality. Second, the yield. So with every degrees rise in earth temperature, actually the crop yield decrease because of all the factors that I mentioned. Here's a very technical diagram, but basically as temperature increase, yield decrease. The third one is quite interesting. I do want to spend some time in it. I don't know how many of you have heard of this. This is called coffee rust. Coffee rust is a fungus, a colorful disease that kill coffee crops and can eliminate livelihood. Is in the Spanish name is called La Boya, and it has been around for decades. For example, in Sri Lanka, this coffee rust has in 20 years killed the entire Sri Lanka coffee industry. And then in 1970, this coffee rust also appeared in Brazil and later spread to Central America and Colombia. In 2012 to 2013, the rising temperature had fueled a major coffee rust crisis in Central America, where unprepared farmers, they don't know how to deal with it. And because of that, and this is a shocking figure, 350,000 people have lost their job because of the coffee rust. And there's no cure for this disease. There's not something like an antibiotic you can cure it, but it can be prevented. However, it's getting increasingly harder to do as rising temperature help propagate the rust. And to put things into perspective, the price for a pound of coffee for consumer in the US has jumped roughly 33% between 2012 to 2013. As I said, the big problem in Central America because of the coffee rust. And here's another diagram. So coffee rust, they like certain temperature. In the certain temperature they like. However, because of the climate change, and so they are moving up higher and higher, and that also means less and less healthy plants, as the coffee rust is infecting the rust pine. So yes, coffee, I don't know, I don't know how many of you who are coffee drinker think about this, but the coffee rust is actually affecting the quality and affecting the prices of our coffee a lot. Another important thing is we talk about the Arabica and the Robusta beans, which are two major coffee beans. However, there are other coffee species, and they are important because the wild species are needed to boost the quality of the commercial plant of the Arabica and Arabica and Robusta. This wild plant serve as genetic library, enabling scientists to crossbreed them and to create plants that are more drought or disease resistant. So just like the rest of that biodiversity, the climate change is affecting wild species, and it really affecting how our commercial species fight. Another livelihood, just like the example I give for the coffee rust, because of the pest is affecting the farmer. And another example is, for example, in Colombia, 100,000 acres of coffee plantations, which is more than 4% of the land under coffee cultivation, has been lost because of climate change. And that is because of the warming by 0.3 degrees in the last decade. It also, because of the climate change, it also means the sunlight has been declined by 90% since the middle of the century due to increasing cloud cover. So there's no longer enough sun to sustain high level of coffee production in the area. And this is really affecting the coffee. The last one, which we covered, because of the rust and everything, is affecting our prices. Right now, the Arabica coffee beans has been fetching about US $2 per pound on the world market. This is nearly double the prices before because of the climate change. Another example is like in Vietnam, which we see earlier, the drought and unseasonably cold weather has also cut back the crop forecast for Robusta beans. So Arabica is usually used for more fine coffee, whereas Robusta is more used for instant coffee. The lack of rain has really affected it and also affected the pricing. So sorry, I already talked about this. So this one. So what are some adaptation you can use for the coffee sector? There's incremental adaptation, meaning small changes. For example, changing the practices or things you can grow the farm to adapt to a coffee, adapt to climate change. There's more systemic adaptation where you can change the strategy, which I'll give you some example. And then finally, some transformative adaptation, which when climate is likely to make coffee production unfeasible, what are some really dramatic things you can change? And here's a diagram. Looks a little bit technical, but I'll go through that. So the incremental one, meaning, for example, you find some new crop varieties or finding more water and soil management. System adaptation, like for example, like the Arabica tree would need more shade trees. So can you find more shade areas for those plants? And for the transformative, you probably would need integrated landscape management, like how you affect the whole ecology or some watershed as well. So to achieve that, you would need to have detailed monitoring of the changes in climate and production, detailed mapping of likely climate change within each coffee region. So even with global warming, temperature is really increasing. Some specific area might have drought or have heavy rainfall, so you will need to take account of that. You would also need to take a note of how the coffee crops migrate towards higher altitude, like we talked about earlier, and how does that affect the pest and all that. You would also need to look at a strategy to facilitate diversification out of coffee when inevitable. So when climate change is so bad that a certain area cannot grow coffee anymore, so how do you make coffee farmer have a livelihood? You might need to grow other plants. Also, you need to look at adaptation techniques such as shade management and genetic breeding. How do we make the Arabica and Robusta bean more robust? So I do want to introduce this. I talk about this more in detail in my sustainable coffee tasting, but basically this is a sustainable coffee challenge that is done by Conservation International, and they basically have this campaign. It's about sustainable coffee. It's like how do we produce coffee with high biological diversity and no chemical input, and how do we also enhance the quality of life for farmers in the society. There's something similar for Starbucks as well. I won't go into detail, that's another topic, but basically if you want to, as a consumer, want to support farmer, want to support this action, there are certain certification you can look at it. There's another example, like I talk about Sun Gong coffee and Shade Gong coffee. For example, the Sun Gong coffee, even though it grows faster, it's actually supporting lifestyle diversity. So it's better for farmer to do more Shade Gong coffee, and that's also better for Arabica. These are some sustainable coffee practice. For example, replace the land's natural nutrients by spreading organic matter. For example, composted coffee pulp instead of like fertilizer, like artificial one. You can also, as I said, Shade Gong is a big thing. Also biodiversification. Also, for example, how to use renewable energy resource. So here are some ideas. And yeah, finally, I think climate change is a very big topic. We can talk about climate change or wine or other things, but I think it is time for action for us. And I don't know how many of you have environmental friendly habits, whether it's using your own tumbler when you go buy coffee, and which I think it sucks because I know still because of COVID, some cafe doesn't allow you to bring your own coffee mugs. But if there's any other things you can do to make for example, like for me, I don't turn on my air condition at all, if possible, just to reduce carbon emission. So I think we can all reflect what we can do to help a better environment. So before I go to Q&A, I also want to say, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to do an Earth Day special, and the theme is called Restoring the Earth. So for those of you who doesn't know, Earth Day is an annual celebration of everything good about the Earth, and we're going to collaborate with Civic Exchange, which is a think tank in Hong Kong, and also Sustain Hong Kong to do that. So if you want to join us, please do. Again, it's free. All our community workshop is free. It's by donation. If you like us, please recommend us to others. So I'll stop there and I'll end the recording.